Indigenous Practices History. The Filipino Indigenous Cultural Communities, or ICCS, are a group of people sharing common bonds of language, costumes, traditions, and other distinctive cultural traits. The ICCS are located in different parts of the country, mostly in the fragile ecosystem such as uplands and coastal areas. Indigenous Knowledge System and Practices, or IKSPS, are body of written or unwritten rules, usage, costumes, and practices, which they have traditionally observed. These indigenous laws have been and continue to be key to their harmonious dealing and the relationship with other people, authorities, and nature. The survival and the cultural identity of the ICC resolve largely in their IKSP. Their IKSP, in turn, are rooted on a central domain and natural resources with which the IPs have been lived for centuries. It is the most appropriate, then, to look at the IKSP and a central domain under one whole context. No one understands the interests of the native ecosystem deeper than to do the ICCS. They understand every component of the structures and functioning as well as many of its uses, so much so that many of their needs and supplied by such resources bases. No wonder these people have managed to survive in these areas for many years. RA 8371, or the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, or IPRA. Some 10 million people, or 15% of the Philippine population, belong to distinctive communities or cultures and retain a close link with their traditions. To honor their identities, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, or IPRA, was passed on October 29, 1997. This law recognized the essential land rights of the indigenous people. This law also creates the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, or NCIP, an office under the Office of the President, and shall be a primary government agency responsible for the formulation and implementation of policies, plans, and programs to recognize, protect, and promote the rights of indigenous cultural communities or indigenous people. Indigenous peoples' outlook on their IKSP. Generally, the IPs have positive regards of their IKSP as it is their means of their survival and basis of the cultural identity. A National Congress held in Antipolo, Rizal last November 1996 provided an opportunity for the IPs to do an inward analysis of their own IKSP as to its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The first is strength. Simple and easily transmitted to the younger generation. It is caters to the level of understanding of the local folks and to their children and grandchildren. They are easily communicated and learned by practices. Low cost, locally availed. These practices are rooted to local resources. They are easily within their reach and easily availed of low-cost or great bases. Affinity to and harmony with nature. The IPs uphold the integrity of land, forest, and natural resources. They live with nature and by nature. This respect of scared sites conform to environmental conservation and management. They have systems causing resources without causing undue stress to such resources. Sustainable. The employment of their IKSP in the development and management of resources has rendered such resources ecology stable, productive through time. Strong sense of community and cooperation. This indigenous expression of cooperation and mutual help have helped to continue their IKSP. They help each other in their traditional way, employing what they know and what they have. Health and environment friendly. As the IKSP shuns from the use of external inputs like chemicals, so the resulting products are safe for the health and conservation of the environment. Self-reliance. Promote reliance on own capacity and resources. It is also encourage expression of creativity, ingenuity, and spirituality. Second is weaknesses. Displacement of IPs from their essential domains. Since the IKSP are rooted in their land and resources, their displacement from such are disruption due to instruction by so-called development projects are tantamount to threatening them and their IKSP. That of old folks who are holders on their original IKSP. While IKSP documentation have been done sporadically, there are a lot of more areas that have remained undocumented, while the old folks who hold them are passing away one by one. Low appreciation of IKSP among younger generation. Time and people are changing in the ICCS with the advent so-called modern. More and more younger generation of IPs are losing appreciation for IKSP. They tend to regard them at lower level as compared to Western introduced knowledge system and practices. Younger generation of IPs in culture crisis. The younger generation of IPs are in culture crisis. They are caught between imbibing seemingly bitter ways of saying and doing things over and above the traditions and practices that they were born with. Lack of organization among IPs. While they have traditional informal organization structure and leadership patterns, these appear insufficient to help promote and monitor IKSP appreciation. This void is much felt at the macro level with weak national formation among IPs. Third is opportunities. Conductive environment recognizing role and right of IPs. This is evident both at the global and local level, especially with the Declaration of 1995 to 2005 as Decade of the IPs. ILO Convention 169 and other general declaration for IPs are helping a lot to focus attention on the IPs and their plight. Government's social reform agenda. This is a thrust of the government has particularly focused greater attention and action for IP sector, especially along with the line of government and poverty alleviation. Institution and organizing supportive for IPs. This is include international funding institution, government and non-government organization, IP-oriented project initiated or supported by this institution have significantly helped in addressing pressing needs of ICCS. Inclusion of IP concern in school curricula. With the open of the Philippine education system to curricular changes, inclusion of IP concern in worth pushing. Third is threats. Influx of outsiders into IPs as central domains. This brings maintaining pressure on limited land and natural resources to the extent of marginalization of the land and afterwards its original IP occupants. Exposure to outside culture and other influences. This can lead to change of thinking and doing which undermine continuity of their own IKSP. It can lead to abandonment of own IKSP in favor of foreign practices. Political intervention from people in power. Some of these people use their position and influence to expoliate a central domain resources. Lack of a system that ensures protection of IKSP. This arises from lack of policies to this effect. The proposed intellectual property rights code is not even clear on this. Some indigenous tribe in the Philippines. Igorot or Cordillerans is the collective name of several Austronesian ethnic groups in the Philippines who inhabit the mountain of Luzon. They believe in the spirits, including those of ancestors, and have complex rituals to propitiate them, and they are no formal clans or tribes, and political organization is limited to village level. Ifugao. The Ifugao call themselves as Ifugao or habitants of the known earth. Other variation of the name are Ifugao, and Ifugao. Half of all Ifugaos have embraced Christianity, but their animist beliefs have been absorbed into their Christianity beliefs. Karaya people Anteke. The Karaya are part of wider Visayas ethno-linguistic group which constitute the large Filipino. Most are Christians, about half are Roman Catholic, and the remaining half are Protestants. Lumad people. The Lumad is a group of indigenous people of the southern Philippines. It is a Cebuano term meaning native or indigenous. The term is short for Katawhang Lumad, literally indigenous people. Lumad are non-Muslim or non-Christian, although the orientation of their cultural developments. Badjaw, they are known as Samalaos or Sea Sama, are found living on houseboats where they make their livelihood solely on the sea as expert fishermen, deep sea divers, and navigators. Badjaw women believe that certain food might have bad physical or mental effect on the body, both to the mother and her child. Tibuli. The Tibuli tribe is an indigenous tribe living in the highlands of Lake Cebu in South Cotabato in the southern part of Philippines. The Tibuli people believe in many gods. Their high regards with the spirits of nature is very much evident in their way of living. This tribe is famous for their complicated beadwork, wonderful woven fabric, and beautiful brass ornaments.